Soul tricks are one of the most foundational grinds we have. Typically, some of the first grinds anybody learns are either a soul grind or a Mizu. Once you learn the mechanics of a solid soul grind, you can unlock a variety of different soul tricks. So today, we're going to learn how to do soul tricks. I'm going to start at the very beginning with a soul grind and work our way up to more advanced grinds like the Mistrial. We're going to talk about what protective gear you need in order to avoid hurting yourself while learning soul tricks. We're going to look at some of the current skates on the market and see how a soul plate can make learning a little easier, but it can actually make it more difficult to perform at a higher level. And finally, we're going to go through as many soul tricks as I can think of and show you examples of them and what weight distribution you need to perform them. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is going to be a long video. We're going to cover a lot of information, and it's going to get a little geeky. If that's not the sort of thing that you're interested in, feel free to skip this video. There's plenty of good soul grind videos out there that'll help you get started. But if you're interested in that sort of stuff, and you want to learn everything that I know about soul tricks, this is the video for you. I am a big proponent of wearing your helmet. I think the helmet is the most important piece of gear that you can have when you go out and skate, especially when you're learning new tricks. It's a little piece of insurance, so we're going to hit our heads eventually. It's nice to know that there's a helmet up there to keep you out of the emergency room. I always recommend getting shin guards for whenever you're learning soul tricks. Soccer shin guards work great. Anything with like a hard plastic to keep that initial impact from splitting your shin open. Be prepared, you're going to hit your shins a lot trying to learn soul grinds, especially if you've got skinnier soles. This is just a good way to keep yourself from getting too hurt. I always wear knee pads whenever I go skate. You're not going to hit your knees very much doing soul tricks, mostly shins, but it's always good to have a little bit of padding up on your knees just in case something happens. This isn't much. It's a nice little padded knee pad. You don't need the big boneless knee pads like before, but just a little bit of padding will help you from just little bumps and bruises. And finally, wrist guards are going to keep your wrists from getting too hurt. I make sure that I have something with an internal metal something that keeps my wrist from flexing, because when you miss a soul grind, you're going to put your hand down on the ledge and that wrist is going to flex back. It's just another good thing to have. So a soul trick can be defined as any grind where you have the soul plate on the object that you're grinding. The first soul trick was probably the soul grind. That was invented way back in like 93, 94. And they were doing soul tricks with extremely minimal soul space. When I first learned soul tricks, it was on a skate very similar to this. This is a rollerblade boxcar, and you can see there is no soul plate. The frame is riveted onto the boot, and if you look at the side, there's no flat sole area. When we would do soul grinds, we would angle it a little bit. So this was our flat area, and if you look at any of the old footage from the Hoax or Bottom Line, you can see they were skating these skates. And soul grinds looked very different. A more recent version of that boot is the Rossi's Majestic 12. And that comes with a soul plate. So this soul plate is completely flat, which means that when you're doing soul tricks, you can lock flat on the ledge. And you can see the width much wider. So there's a nice ample space for you to lock onto the object. Now on the other end of the spectrum, you have some really wide soul plates, like this Adapt Stealth. These soul plates are still flat, but you can see the width of this soul plate is nice and wide. Now having a wide soul plate initially sounds like a great idea. Why wouldn't you want as much soul space as possible? And for learning soul tricks, this is probably a good idea. You know, you're gonna miss less often, you're gonna be able to jump onto more ledges. If all you're gonna skate are rails or mini ramp with raised coping, absolutely no problem with big soul plates. Get as big as you want, get as consistent as you want, you're not gonna have any problems. But if you're gonna skate ledges or angle iron, or something that doesn't have a raised grind area, you might actually want a skinnier soul plate. Let me explain. So this grind box has two different styles of objects to grind. First, it has raised coping on one side. This simulates a handrail or a practice rail or mini ramp coping. On the other side, it has decking. This is flat and simulates angle iron or any ledges that you might find in the street. Now, the trick to balancing out a long sole trick is to get over top of the object that you're grinding. You can see when grinding raised coping, there's not a huge difference between big sole plates and little sole plates. They both balance easily on the rail, and you can adjust your body weight to sit right on top of the object. When skating ledges or anything with a flat grinding surface, it's going to be easier to get on top of the object with a smaller sole plate than it is with a bigger sole plate. There's a lot of variance here, and I'm sure a lot of experienced skaters are going to disagree with me, but from my experience, learning sole tricks is usually easier with a wider sole plate, but it can be a limitation when you're trying to get to a higher level grinding ledges. Let's take a look at some of the more popular skates on the market and see how those sole plates compare. Keep in mind, all of these numbers are approximate. I used different frames in the different setups, and I just used a ruler instead of calipers, so don't take them as the word, but it's a good comparison to see which sole plates are slightly bigger and which sole plates are slightly narrow. And as a reminder, you can learn sole tricks on any skate. We learned them on the rollerblade boxcars, and those were the skinniest of soles. Bigger is going to be a little bit easier to learn. Smaller is going to be a little bit easier on ledges as you get better. All right, let's get started learning the mechanics of sole tricks. I'll be skating the Rossi's Majestic 12 with the 50-50 balance frames. Now, these are probably the skinniest soles that I have, and they might be the thickest frames that I have. This is just to illustrate that if I can do it on this setup, you can do it on whatever setup you have. I'm also skating these frames anti-rocker. Anti-rocker means that the middle wheels, instead of the same wheel on each of the positions, the two middle wheels are hard, small wheels, and that gives you more space for grinds and less chance of sticking on the object. You're not going to stick very much on your middle wheels doing sole tricks, but there is the off chance that you will. So learning on anti-rocker is always a good idea. You can definitely do all of these tricks skating flat though. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about obstacles to learn on. I have this beautiful box here. It's about 12 inches tall with raised coping. This is not normal. Most people won't have something like this. If you have a curb, if you have a ledge, if you have a practice rail, anything that you can find will probably be a good object to start on. I usually recommend that you do something about 12 inches tall. That gives you enough height so that you're actually jumping onto the object instead of just rolling onto it. Curbs are okay, that's where I learned how to do sole grinds, but if you can find something that's about 12 inches tall, that's probably a little better. Now, figuring out which foot you do sole tricks on predominantly can be a little tricky. Usually I recommend you try doing squats and lift up one of your feet. Whichever one feels more in balance, you should probably focus on that foot first to do sole tricks. For me, that's my right foot. It's also the foot, if I'm playing soccer, that I kick with. It's my strongest dominant foot. Everybody's going to be a little different though. You might want to try both feet to see which one feels more natural to you. All right, so first we're going to get comfortable with our sole foot. For me, that's my right foot. Approach the object, just stand next to it, pick your foot up, and just kind of put your foot on it. Get used to the feeling of locking on to the object. You're not trying to stall and balance or anything like that. All you're trying to do is get your foot used to hitting that object, try to make it flat on the sole, and try to get on there without going too high or too low. Once you feel comfortable with your foot just slapping up against the object, we're going to try it with a little speed and see what it feels like to slap it up while moving. So you're going to feel what grinding actually feels like. Now it's important to note we're not trying to balance here. We're not trying to do a full grind. We're just trying to get comfortable with our sole. We want to know what it feels like to slap the sole foot on the object. And we want to know what it feels like when you're sliding. Now notice two things. One, I'm bending my legs when I jump on the sole. We don't want to just jump straight-legged. That's going to be really difficult to balance. You want to pick up your foot, keep that ankle bent so that your sole foot is completely flat, and balance with your knee and keep your hips over your heels. Also notice that I'm slapping my foot on there. You want to put it down with a little bit of authority. You want your sole foot to really feel that object. If you just place it up there, it doesn't do the same thing. It doesn't transfer your weight properly. But you want to slap it down so that it actually feels like it's connecting to the object. All right, so now that we're familiar with what a sole trick feels like on the object, let's try it with a little bit of speed and pick up your other foot. So this is going to be a 1 foot step-on Makio. That's what the technical term would be for this grind. It's not really a grind, it's more of a learning device, but it'll really help you get familiar with what grinding feels like. So rather than picking your foot up and putting it straight down on the ledge or on the object, you want to roll your foot over a little bit. We were talking about this with the different sole plate widths. You want to roll your foot over a little bit so that the bottom of your heel is positioned right where the bottom of your hip would be. If all you're doing is putting your foot up and your body weight is all the way over here, you're going to fall off. If you put your foot up and you roll your foot over and your position is right on top of the object, you can stand for as long as you want. Do this walk-on Makio like 1,000 times. This will give you the strength that you need to do basically any sole trick. The only difference on other sole tricks is the position of your foot and the distribution of your weight. The sole grind is the first sole trick that I learned, and it might be the first ever sole trick invented. A sole grind is a Makio with your front foot on the inside edge. So to learn the sole grind, all we're going to do is the same Makio, but put our front foot in front of us on the inside edge. A lot of people find the sole grind position to be a little awkward. Your body isn't meant to tweak together like this, and you'll find yourself, when you're learning them, falling off your sole foot a lot. What that means is you're turning your shoulders more to face the object instead of keeping them straight down the object. The way to remedy that is keep this back foot bent and push this front foot out. You can actually do these poses in your shoes. Just get your shoes on, stand on one foot, and find a crack in the ground and just push that front foot out. Now, once you get comfortable locking that sole grind and you're able to do your entire object, you should try learning to jump on with both feet. This can be a little intimidating because people can get hurt jumping on. It's a lot safer to just step on, but it's going to be very limiting if all that you do is step on your grinds to do anything taller or a rail or coping or anything like that. One trick to jumping on sole tricks is instead of thinking jump onto the object, you want to just raise your feet to the object. You're going to need to jump a little bit, but raising your feet, bending your legs, contracting into your body, that's how you're going to get onto this object safely. When I learned how to do soul grinds, that's the only grind that I did for months. There's nothing wrong with sticking with a single grind for hours and hours and hours. You don't have to learn everything. Just learn what feels good to you. The Mizu is my favorite soul trick. I don't know what it is about the Mizu, but I always have a lot of confidence when I'm approaching an object and I have Mizu in mind. It's my warm-up trick. It's the trick that I do to test how sticky or how slippery an object is, and I almost never miss a Mizu. So to do the Mizu, we're going to do exactly what we did for the soul grind. We're going to start with a Makio, and then we're going to put, instead of this foot in front of us, we're going to put it behind us. So a few tricks on getting the Mizu. First of all, just like the soul grind, take your time. Do it once, do it twice, just keep doing it over and over again until you feel comfortable with the grind. Make sure that your body position is over the object. It's a little bit easier with the Mizu because you can see the object and you can see your soul foot as it gets on the object. Mizus are style killers. There's not a lot of good-looking Mizus out there. I've been able to do a few that I've been pretty happy with. The trick is to get your body low. So you're going to want to exaggerate this front foot and get as low as you can on this Mizu. Just like the soul grind, we're going to try jumping on with both feet. This one is a little bit easier in my opinion because you can spot that front foot with your soul. You know where the object is. You can watch it get onto the object and your back foot is just along for the ride. For weight distribution, you're going to be more on your soul foot than your back foot, but really it's going to be about 60% on your front foot, maybe 40% on your back foot, less than the soul grind, which the soul grind is predominantly a soul trick with your front foot balancing. I found that if I'm doing a really styled out Mizu, the more weight I put on the back foot, the better. If you're coming off your Mizu early, remember, you've got to get yourself over the object. If you're doing it on a ledge, it might be easier with a narrow soul plate versus a wide soul plate. So now that you know the soul grind and you know the Mizu, you've got 90% of soul tricks down. All you need to do now is think about different positioning of your feet and different weight distribution to unlock the rest. The Makio is probably the most basic of soul tricks. It doesn't require another foot. You're just going to be on your soul foot. So just like we were doing in warm-ups, put your Makio foot on and just balance. Makios are surprisingly difficult to jump on. I struggle a lot doing Makios. It's hard to guide that foot without another foot to help me. I struggle a little bit trying to get over the object with a Makio. I don't know why. I think it's just a lack of committing because I don't have that other foot to balance me out. One trick to get a little bit more over the object is instead of going parallel, try going a little bit into the object so that your momentum throws you on top of the object instead of next to it. That can sometimes help. A Makio is a really great grind for expressing your creativity. There are dozens of different grabs you can do when you're on a Makio. There are different foot placement you can do when you're on your Makio. There's different switch ups that you can do when you're on your Makio. It counts as a grind, but you really have no rules. Do whatever you want. Just make sure that your Makio foot is on the object and it still counts. Now the star grind, which used to be called the porn star, but I don't want to use that term in YouTube because they might flag me. So we're calling it the star grind today. The star grind is based on the Mizu. So just like a Mizu, we're going to put our front foot like a Makio, and our back foot, instead of dragging it on the inside edge, we're going to drag it on the outside edge. Now the trick to landing that back foot properly is all in your shoulders and your hips. Instead of looking straight down the object, if you try to do that with a star grind, you're going to end up dragging your toe on top of the object, and that's not a good look. Instead, we're going to open our shoulders to face the object a little bit more, maybe like 30 degrees, 25 degrees. Not a lot, but you're going to want to push this knee into the back of your other knee and open your hips so that you're facing towards the object. Your weight distribution for a star grind is going to be very similar to a Mizu, with a little bit more weight on your front foot. Maybe 70-30, maybe 75-25. Most of your weight is going to be centered around the heel of your sole foot. This back foot really just helps with a little bit of balance, a little bit of angle correction. Now, I'll be completely honest, I've done maybe 3 of those before today. The first few attempts, I had no idea what I was doing. But after giving it a few goes and thinking about where my back foot needs to go and where my hips and shoulders need to be positioned, I feel like I was able to get them pretty solid. That is just a testament to learning that Mizu and learning that sole foot. Everything builds off of those 2 grinds. And if you have those 2 grinds mastered, you can do any sole trick, no problem. The Mistrial is a Mizu trick. So you're going to start with your Makio foot in front, but instead of dragging your back foot, you're going to shove the inside edge of your back foot next to your boot. Now, Mistrial is a squatted grind. You need to make sure you're nice and loose, nice and limber. Otherwise, your Mistrial is going to end up looking like this, and nobody wants to do a Mistrial like that. Now, I learned a Mistrial after I learned my back royale. It is a more advanced sole trick to get looking right. Anybody could do it, but to get it to look right, you need to have pretty good balance. You need to have a pretty good back royale, I feel. I'm going to show you a few examples and try to walk you through what I'm thinking when I do a Mistrial. Most important thing though, you got to squat down really low. You got to put your center of balance right over that heel so that both of the feet get about the same amount of weight. And you need to open up your hips so that you're looking away from the object. A few tips. So if your Mistrial, you're having a hard time getting this Mistrial boot down, that's totally normal. A few things to do about that. Try pushing this front foot, this sole foot, out in front of you a little bit more to compensate for this back foot getting under your hips. I know it's a weird feeling. Again, it's not something that you can really stall and learn. You just got to kind of do it in motion. Learning back royales will really help you with this trick. But before you learn back royales, if you want to try to do them, push this front foot out a little bit more, squat yourself down, maybe even sitting down on a bench or something and get yourself into the position. That's what is going to help you remember where your feet should be when you land. There were a few times where my back foot got stuck and popped out to a Mizu. That's totally expected. All that means a little bit more weight behind you, a little bit more pushing this front foot out in front of you. If your foot ends up taking over, if your back foot takes all of the weight and your front foot slips out a little bit more, that means your balance is a little bit too far back. You need to put a little bit more weight on your front foot, on your sole foot. It's a really fun trick. I'll say it is a hard trick to get consistent, but now that I have them pretty controlled, I absolutely love this Mistrial. The acid sole is one of the original sole tricks. It came out right after the sole grind and the Mizu, maybe around the time of the Makio. It is a sole grind, but your front foot, instead of being on your inside edge, is pushed out in front of you on your outside edge. Just like the sole grind, you can practice this by stalling anywhere with your shoes. Makio foot, your front foot, outside edge in front of you. Open up your hips a little bit so that instead of looking down the object, you're gonna look a little bit out and just place that front foot out. Most of the weight's going to be on your sole foot, like 80% of your weight is on your sole foot, and you just throw this front foot out in front of you. The acid sole isn't a very common trick. You don't see a lot of people doing them, especially doing them well. I think that's due to it really just being a sole grind with your front foot twisted. You don't get any added benefit from that front foot being up there. If anything, there's more weight on your back foot than a sole grind. So you would probably do 90% on your back foot, maybe 10% on your front foot. It's not really there for anything, but just to prove that, hey, I'm doing a two-footed grind. I don't do a lot of acid soles. I fell a bunch trying to get this one. It's very common to leave with both feet at the same time, but lock your sole foot before you lock your front foot. It's just the way that acid soles are, because you're not really leading with that front foot. You're not getting any balance with that front foot. It's just kind of sitting there. This is going to be the most difficult grind I can think of, where both feet are probably not going to land at the same time. Our final grind for the day is the torque sole. And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know that I've ever tried a torque sole before. A torque sole is a sole trick, but instead of putting your front foot in front of you on your inside edge, you're going to put your front foot in front of you on your outside edge. Now, I don't really know how to go about learning this, so we're going to learn it together. But my hypothesis is I'm going to turn my hips in, and I'm going to put most of my weight in the middle, maybe towards my toe, so that instead of balancing mostly on my sole foot, I'm going to put a little bit more weight on my front, maybe 55% on my sole, 45% on my front foot, just like a Mistrial, but reverse. I'm going to put my shoulders so that I'm facing the object so that I can turn this sole foot in front of me and push down really hard and try to squat myself so that I'm as low as I can get on the object. All right, so the torque sole might be more difficult than the Mistrial. It is a serious forward lean trick. So you've got to really commit to that front foot, doing basically a front farve. That's a really fun trick. Again, this is an advanced sole trick. You don't see many people doing torque soles anymore. It's a really fun trick if you're playing around. I don't know that I'm going to be doing these more often, but it just goes to show, if you've got that foundational sole, if you can do your sole and your Mizu, and you can master those two tricks, any other sole grind is just going to feel like a variation of one of those two tricks. So now you know everything that I know about sole tricks. Now, we didn't cover every sole variation, but those are really good foundational sole tricks that you can use to expand your trick vocabulary. Remember, starting with that step on Makio, transition to the sole grind, transition to the Mizu, and do those for 1,000 times. You got to strengthen that muscle, get your balance nice and dialed in, and then you'll be able to do any of the sole tricks that you saw today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If there's anything that I could do to improve this video for the next iteration, please let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. I'm going to try to do a few more of these in the future. And if you have any topics that you'd like me to address, let me know in the comments as well.